you'll be able to follow this over Facebook if you want on our productized conference page in case you're having any difficulties watching this on Zoom. Otherwise, Zoom, of course, should be your preferred option. Has it allows you to be a little bit more interactive and use the Q&A feature and other features on the webinar to jump into the conversation. We're just waiting for Ken to join us. He will be with us in a minute or so. So let me just welcome people that are joining us. We have Andrea, we have Andrew, Gonçalo, Joel, Justin, Paulo, and Punit with us. And like I was telling you, we have over 50 people registered. So I guess we'll have more people joining us along the session. This is a session that we expect to take just about 1 hour before we wrap it up. So welcome to our special live edition of Productize Talks with Ken Sandy. Productize Talks take place monthly in Lisbon, and they are networking events with product people and also a great way to listen to product experts like Ken on topics like product research, career management, and the stories behind great products. My name is Andre Marquis, and I'm the founder of Productize. I'm your host today, and I'm also the organizer of our annual Productize conference on the art of making products that people love. Our guest today is, of course, Ken Sandy. Welcome, Sandy. Welcome to Productize Talks. Ken has over 20 years experience and he's a veteran in the tech product management industry. He pioneered and teaches the first product management course offered in an engineering school at UC Berkeley, which has over 400 PM alumni now. Ken served as a VP of products at leading online education companies like Masterclass and lynda.com, now LinkedIn Learning, and is currently an executive consultant and advisor for startups and scale-ups alike. His recently released The Influential Product Manager, How to Lead and Launch Successful Technology Products, is a highly practical and approachable guide to becoming more effective in navigating the challenging collaborative aspects of the product manager's role. So Ken, thank you so much for being with us. I'm just going to do a very quick run through Productize and what Productize is before we actually start the day with your own presentation. And as you would expect, I'll be sharing my screen with you so you can then do the presentation from your own computer. So Productize this year is online. We call ourselves, we have been since the beginning, the Product Thinking Conference. We are happening 26 and 27 November 2020, has an online event. Workshops have started already. And Productize Conference is our annual sixth edition of an immersive hands-on experience full of workshops and talks that are aiming to train and inspire product people to bring even better products to life. We have been considered one of the best design and innovation conferences in Europe and one of the best in the world. And we've been proud to have some of the leading product people like Marty Kagan, Melissa Perry, Jeff Cottle, Teresa Torres, and many, many others here in Lisbon or online. We have been lucky to have attendees from leading companies over the world, and the numbers for 2020 are over 500 online participants, people from all over the world, over 8 workshops, and almost 40 hours of product training online. So for that, we have 16 inspiring speakers, and Ken Sandy happens to be one of them. Is going to teach us some lessons from EdTech and his experience in the sector, which is, I guess, ever more important nowadays. We're also going to have Sara Garcia to talk about in-field research methods, Jajit Singh from OLX Group on managing the art and science of magic of validation, Amin Bashi on designing for augmentation, automation, Sabrina Haska from BMW on doing an internship as your customer, Shabit Shuk from Google on overcoming the victim mindset to transform into a product leader, and also Bettina from Springer Nature on turning data into products, Shorab on senior PM from AirAsia on product management in a pandemic crisis, or people like Hadika Dut, co-founder of the Radical Product Thinking Movement on iterating less and achieving more. 8 workshops. One of those workshops actually happened today, and that means that we have 6 workshops that you can still apply to or register to, except that 2 are already sold out, and Ken Sandy workshop happens to be one of those. So create your killer product strategy is sold out. I guess you can still apply to the waiting list in case anyone cannot make it, or just go for one of the workshops that are still available. The next one being Shabit Shuk, already sold out, but on September 24th we have João Carvalho with but product strategy for platform businesses. You can get your ticket at conference.productize.co, but because we have such a special and nice guest today, you can also use CanSandy20 to get 20% discount. So that means you get 20% off today, any given ticket, including the bundle pass, which includes 1 workshop and the 2 days conference. Just use CanSandy all caps 20 on the registration page, apply it, and you'll get 20% off automatically. That's how easy it is. Or you can just scan this QR code to get to the page. Okay, so we have Ken Sandy with us, and that's exactly why I guess you guys are here. And we have over almost 20 people now online with us, and I will hand over the presentation to Ken. So Ken, the way I'm going to do this is you are one of the panelists. So that means that I'm going to make you a host so you can do screen share your screen. Okay.
Sounds great.
Stop my own share, and I guess you can share yours.
Yeah. Okay, you should be able to see a full screen here. Great, excellent. Well, exciting. I'm super excited to be participating in Productized and really thrilled to see the workshop sold out. I'll have to, it's very, very popular. It's a very popular topic, and I promise it'll be a good one. So I'm really, really thrilled at that. And also looking forward to speaking. I'm really thrilled also to be giving this little webinar today. It's a good crowd to sort of like really get into a very important topic, which is more around that the psychology by which you need to approach your role. It's a topic we don't talk about a lot, but it's really something that I found to be absolutely essential in terms of being able to be effective in your role and remind yourself of the very broad nature of the role and how you need to kind of act differently at different times. So I'll start quickly with a little bit of a personal story. Early in my career, I found myself, this is my superpower, to almost supernaturally be able to look at a problem, comprehend a huge amount of disparate and sometimes contradictory data, and really get into and understand the analysis and seek out, like a detective, interesting trends, new insights that would create clarity and a path forward. I really thought that was what a product manager would do. is to always be able to kind of get into that problem space and understand all of the data. However, getting up at an all hands to talk about the progress of my product horrified me. I didn't really like to talk in public. Look at me now. Something was missing. In some forums, I remained very ineffective as a product manager. I'd getting broad-based support of convincing a team to pursue what for me was the obvious path after looking at all of this data. And this was quite frustrating. I remember discussing this with my then manager and mentor after a difficult meeting with stakeholders around my product that hadn't gone according to plan. My data, what I presented, was spot on. The insights were pretty self-evident. The next steps were about as obvious as they came given the data, yet I hadn't inspired my audience to be able to get the investment that I had been asking for. And we were actually at risk of pivoting the development team to something else. My mentor said that it isn't sufficient to be right. Yes, your analysis was very buttoned up and the data was very convincing, but your audience didn't feel it. How it was going to serve our customers better, how it was going to build the business, how it was going to inspire employees and deliver against our strategic goals. So, if I was then to look at one of my own product managers, I remember quite distinctly his presentation all about being a highly personal story, personalized testimonials, the customer journey, something that was very, very inspiring. And while he also still had the richer assessment of the business opportunity, he was much more successful at achieving his goals. Now, we were just different. But while I was a natural analyst, he was an evangelist, and he'd been a lot more successful than me at actually achieving his goals. So I set out to try to understand what had been going on here, why me playing to my strengths had not actually been as successful as if I'd been much more well-rounded and trying to appeal to not just the data, but also the emotion of the situation. So what I have since done is try to develop a framework that can help you as a product manager avoid the same mistakes that I was making. So this framework, quite simply, and I'm going to go through a framework first, and then I'm going to give you some examples of the different mindsets that result as at work. So you have some more tangible things that you can then take and apply in your workplace. And then we'll finish up with some questions. So imagine a framework with two axes. On one end of the first axis is imagine. Imagine means to look beyond today's reality, to be open to discovering opportunities, look at multiple potential solution paths, to build excitement for new possibilities, and to basically suspend long-held beliefs and ignore the limitations that you might have in your business. At the other end of the scale is inspect. Inspect is to look at your product and your customer as it is today. It's to gather data and to build a customer empathy by interviewing them. It's to discover hidden insights. It's to assess the product performance, evaluate new opportunities, uncover risks and issues, and to prioritize. Imagine that axis is crossed by another. This axis at one end of the scale has this divergent thinking. Engaging in divergent thinking allows you to broaden your perspective, brainstorm, discover, share data, explore parallel paths of inquiry, and make sure you're not adopting any particular approach prematurely. At the other end of the scale is this convergent thinking. Focus is essential, particularly once you've decided to prioritize and pursue a particular path. Focus allows you to challenge your assumptions, mitigate risk, strengthen and deepen your understanding in your plan, and to build momentum. It helps you avoid distractions, misalignment, analysis paralysis, and constantly revisiting and relitigating the options that you've already dismissed. So I believe that there exist now 4 separate mindsets that product managers need to engage in on an ongoing basis at the right point in time. And each of those has some very key strengths. So I'll talk about those right now. In that rightmost quadrant, in the divergent imagine sector, is the explore mindset. Explorer allows you to set context and customer needs, balance time in understanding your problem space, allows you to use that creative thinking to discover opportunities and potential solutions. The analyst mindset allows you to engage in quantitative and qualitative assessment. It's when you're inspecting your product as it is today. You know what outcomes you're looking to affect. You go hunting for new data and insights. You talk to users, customers, to get to know them as people and observe their problem. And you use it to set context across your team. This is where you're really digging in to understand your customer and their unmet needs, and being able to come back with insights into your team. In the inspect convergence quadrant is the challenger mindset. The challenger mindset allows you to shine light on the contrary data, flaws, hidden assumptions, and allows you to kind of look around corners to preempt issues. Challenger mindset, you ask the hard questions, you eliminate less promising paths, you fill out assumptions and risks you're looking to mitigate, you're open to the possibility of being wrong. You avoid being defensive and sometimes willing to change course even once you've supported. In this mindset, you're often very critical of your own path. Rather than debate and ignore the dissenting voices of your team or dismiss customers that aren't happy with your product, you actually embrace their point of view instead and try to understand. And then finally, and this is where I was going wrong, is the evangelist mindset. Many product managers really struggle with this particular mindset, because this is really where you need to get out there to motivate your team, build company-wide support for your path. It's all about being able to focus and build that broad-based support. It's when you engage your stakeholders in your team in the solution. You try to give them the opportunity to contribute to the solution and really get them excited about the problem at hand. Now, I will give you some more examples of each of the four mindsets at work. But a question that often comes up at this point is, are the mindsets uniquely suited to different industries, stages of growth? Do you apply them linearly within the life cycle? So I'm going to answer some of these questions. The first is that would you apply different mindsets sort of linearly according to a life cycle? So early on in your product development, you might be emphasizing more of the explorer and analyst behaviors, where you're exploring new possibilities, looking into new problems. Whereas later in that life cycle, you might be switching more to the analyst and challenger mindset during prioritization and scoping. And then finally, during delivery, you're more working on the challenger and evangelist mindsets. I think that is actually somewhat true, that there is a progression as you're going through your product life cycle or the development life cycle to flip between the different mindsets. However, I also know that different situations, you need to be able to flip between these mindsets, even in a particular day. For example, in one day, you might be evangelizing and focusing your team at the task at hand and getting them to understand why it's important to be delivering what they're working on right now. Well, you might also that same day be seeking out data, doing your own analysis or doing customer interviews to challenge your assumptions. Or you might be discussing with executives on whether your idea is going to be successful and what those success criteria might mean to even move to the next stage, which is more of the challenger mindset. So we notice that even in the same day, you need to be able to move seamlessly between these, which can be very, very challenging because it's a lot of context switching and it's a lot of moving between maybe strengths and areas that you're less strong at. Another question is within maturity. Maybe a newer product is likely to have more vision and less quantitative data, and that is true. You'll find that in say a startup environment, that a highly visionary founder who's more on the explorer side and evangelist side is likely to be driving that startup forward. However, even in a startup, that's not an excuse to skip data collection. In fact, your balance of that stakeholder to be able to bring data to ground them or to diplomatically challenge their assumptions of things that they may miss may mean that your product is likely to be more successful. Likewise, a later stage product might have loads of product performance data. Maybe you're grinding out iterative optimizations. Maybe you're managing product that's very, very mature and even declining. And so you're really just focused on maintaining and keeping kind of the lights on. Even then, even though you might be much more on that analyst trying to figure out like what is the next thing, what next incremental improvement to make, you must keep your team motivated on working on even a very mature product and seeing the value of their work and impact of their customer. So even in a product maturity cycle, I find that product managers must still apply all four of these mindsets. I mentioned before also maybe that your mindsets change based on your stakeholders' strengths or comfort zones. And I think that is very, very true. It's very easy, I have done this myself, working for, say, a very visionary founder, of getting very swept up in that. Or maybe when you're working with a very strong, challenging stakeholder who believes that they've done all of the analysis and has a very specific prescriptive path forward because they believe that is the right path. It's important not to default in that case to just following their path. You need to do your own analysis and your own challenge and challenge your own assumptions because they may actually be wrong. So when you are faced with a stakeholder that's got a particular strength, your job as product manager is, can you move to balance them out, obviously very diplomatically, to avoid, in the latter case, authority bias, or in the former case, this sort of confirmation bias problem. And then finally, as I mentioned before, you have to avoid playing just to your strengths, like the mistake I made initially. But understand your natural strengths and use it, particularly if you can help balancing others. Secondly, understand and practice getting better at your weaknesses. So go on customer interviews rather than avoid them, or get up and do presentations at all hands rather than avoid them. And then finally, don't overlook leveraging the strengths of others. If you're not a natural challenger, go and find that engineer who always seems to find and poke holes at problems or be very hypercritical of the work that's being done. Listen to them, as that will give you very interesting insights, even though they may not be much fun to be around. So I'm now going to move on to just talk about like how you can apply some of these mindsets in practice. So driving innovation for with an explorer mindset. First of all, I find that many product managers rush into defining solutions instead of taking time out to define what they're trying to achieve, why, and for whom, and getting everybody on the same page of what problem we're trying to solve. The advantage of doing that is that you can engage a larger group of people in brainstorming and coming up with potential creative solutions of challenging the problem and making sure that it's a valid problem to be working on. So up front, take time to define your target customer, a problem statement, your product vision, and share that with your team so you all have that same context. Secondly, make sure you're canvassing broadly for opportunities and ideas. Your job as product manager is not to have ideas. It's to find the best ideas to take them forward for the business of your customers. So rather than resist where lots of ideas coming from stakeholders and sales team and customers, really embrace that. Canvas very broadly, bring them in, and then use later mindsets to critically assess them. And a third specific technique is don't skip discovery and validation of your potential solutions. Do it early, do it often, keep it lightweight, and make sure that you're not locking into one particular solution too early. So the explorer mindset allows you to try out different solutions and to learn new things and to sort of discover the possibilities, as opposed to deciding that this is the product that we're going to build and immediately jumping to requirements. I'll give you an example of a very simple way to maintain a good explorer mindset. And that is using a simple framework to define your vision. This is a very super simple statement that I literally have clients that we put this up on the wall when we write it, and it basically really describes the underlying motivation and desired outcome for the user, not the proposed solution, and how the solution that you're building is going to be unique in the market. There are many approaches to write a vision, but this is one of the simplest, and a simple workshop with your team can really inspire them and remind them why your product should exist in the world. Another example is to really value group brainstorming and keeping people engaged in contributing not only ideas, but also potential solutions. I had an example where it was a consumer company that was having real difficulty in increasing their subscriptions for their product. They were serving college students, and they had really suffered a big decline in their subscriptions. We set aside a whole day workshop that included business, executive, and development team members, so right outside of the product team, and engage them to really understand and restate the product vision. We looked at the current product and talked about how to increase engagement rates. We discovered insights around how we had been very much focusing the product development on only incremental, occasional sort of feature improvements on the existing. It was a homework help product for students, and they were using this very much as a crutch. And we realized that we had a much bigger mission in play. And that was that we wanted to be their home study companion rather than just help them with homework when they got stuck. And when we were able to speak at that level, we then brought out a bunch of our competitors and compared what they were doing for students versus what we were doing. And we found weaknesses in theirs as well as strengths in theirs. And that led to a brainstorming where we identified 5 very high potential opportunities, including creating community for virtual study groups, test preparation, access for live tutors, and personalized content collections. None of these had actually been previously considered for the roadmap, although they now seem fairly obvious. By using the full brain power of all those people in the room, we were able to explore possibilities that we hadn't really considered before. And that became the new roadmap. Let me talk a little bit about what it looks like to develop customer understanding using your analyst mindset. I think we'll be pretty familiar with this, but there's some things that we overlook. First of all, before you actually get too far into developing your product, make sure that you're setting and monitoring qualitative performance metrics for your product. I'm still surprised how often I run into product managers that I'm working with who don't do this. So setting those metrics and making sure you can track them and holding yourself accountable to moving those, even if others are not, is just a super powerful way of constantly making sure that you're looking at the numbers. Do not overlook the value of building empathy and the value of qualitative insights. I sense that we often value quantitative data at a higher level than qualitative data. Well, the problem is that quantitative data might tell you statistically of some distant issue. It'll show you that there's some trend there that you need to look at. It'll give you some insights about where to look, but it's the qualitative data that where you often discover the underlying pain point, what is really causing the pain for the customer, and what you need to do about it. So make sure that you're really making sure that you have both the quantitative and the qualitative perspective when you're making decisions. And then finally, become your own analyst. Product managers are always having to fight for attention from data teams, from analytics teams, to get those sorts of resources so they can actually get access to the numbers they need. So empower yourself to do it yourself. That means learn how to use your analytics tools. It means learning advanced Excel functions, especially pivot tables, charts, lookup functions, and actually asking for large quantities of raw data so you can actually manipulate that data yourself and look and cut and slice data so you're not constantly going back to data teams and asking for new insights. You can rapidly kind of iterate on that yourself. Secondly, don't outsource going and talking to customers. Have first-hand experience. Go and partner with your user experience people to actually understand customers firsthand and participate in those. And then finally, just like you would make a very close friend in engineering who can always help you figure out a difficult problem, make a close friend in your data analytics team as well. They'll be able to help you learn a new technique and figure out how to get to a tricky issue. Secondly, look how easy it is to create success criteria for your product. They only need to be just a couple of different statements. These can be OKRs, they can be metrics that you develop. SMART metrics are specific, measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant to the product initiatives that you're undertaking, and they're timely in that you can actually create a feedback loop so you can measure and adapt using these metrics. So you'll notice that these metrics that I've laid out here get to the heart of leading indicators that your product is creating value for your customer. You'll notice that they're not about making revenue necessarily, although indirectly. They're not about your product or your team's performance, but they're about whether or not your product is successfully moving your customers through a relationship to value. Let's talk about the challenger mindset. This one is often very, very hard to understand. The challenger mindset starts with approaching all opportunities and all things that you're working on as hypotheses requiring validation. There's a subtle change that occurs when you restate your idea or the direction in your team as a hypothesis. It allows you to force you to focus on the problem you're solving and removes your personal feelings or attachment to that problem. It makes you err on the side of smaller iterations because you could be wrong, and you value validating consistently. Secondly, embrace dissenting voices and constructive conflict. This is something that isn't humanly enjoyable. Hearing critique about your product or hearing about a stakeholder that isn't happy about the product performance or losing a sales deal. Those are all not very happy moments in your product journey, but they can often be pivotal. Because when you understand and try to get to the bottom of what the problems are, you may discover hard truths that you need to confront in your product. And when you address those, you can really have breakthroughs. It's important that you don't overcorrect to the unhappy customers. But I'm still surprised. I have data to suggest that almost all product managers, particularly in the enterprise space, something like 93%, do not talk to customers that they've lost or customers who are unhappy with their product. They tend to listen to the loudest voices in the room, and that's a mistake. Likewise, when an engineer in your team is struggling to understand the value of their work and why they should be doing something you're asking them, perhaps you're being too prescriptive. Take time to step back and talk about the problem. And they may actually point out a better way to approach it. So this is where the challenger mindset really comes in on its own, is when you get into that constructive conflict space. And the third really difficult thing that a challenger mindset faces is saying no. Being prepared to focus, cut scope, prioritize even those favorite little features of yourself or your stakeholder, cut and make sure that you get to the essence of what your product is going to bring, and bring it to market quicker as a result. Just to show you a quick example, a hypothesis can be as easy as deciding on who this is for, defining the underlying pain point, unmet need, or the opportunity, knowing what you know today, which is often scant data. What benefit do you think the customer will receive? What benefit the business will receive? And then you put it together in a simple statement, put that at the top of your product spec or your Confluence page or your Jira ticket, and state very precisely what it is that your hypothesis is and the measurable outcome that you're expecting from it. And remind your team that just because you're going down a path doesn't mean you know with certainty it's going to be correct. This is a little tool that I found on the internet I quite like. It's sorry for the eye chart. This will be in the materials which we will send out afterwards. But essentially, it gives you an idea of a confidence level. This is a particularly good tool to use in tandem with either ICE or RICE scoring if you're using that for prioritization. But you'll notice that around this wheel, confidence is actually very low, even when you've got a very strong opinion from like a stakeholder or another team member. And even with anecdotal evidence or some market data, it's still extremely low. And it only becomes high confidence as you get lots of supported data by constant iteration and validation and maybe an MVP. And then only later, even at launch, you may have test data that gives you medium confidence it's going to be successful, but even after launch, you need to go back and make sure that you're really challenging yourself. Did we actually deliver the goal on the goals? And what, if we did not, what do we need to do differently? Far too many products are launched once and then left, and we have no idea whether or not they actually achieve their goals. And then finally, building momentum with the evangelist mindset. What that means is you as product manager need to own the proactive communication with your stakeholders. So you're doing that regularly and making sure that you're communicating broadly, not just to your manager, but or to senior stakeholders, but very broadly across everyone who might influence your product. Development managers, might be sales members, customer support, wherever there might be an opportunity to talk up your product and get somebody on side to help you be successful in market or to help your team work better, more effectively. That's what evangelism can really bring. Status updates are boring. Remind people about the value that your team and your product will bring the organization. And do this repeatedly so the goals that you're actually trying to achieve really sink in. It takes not just once, not twice, but sometimes 7 times to say something before someone really comprehends it and believes it is important. Rather than prescribing solutions, which I see this all the time in very dry, boring requirement documentation, spend time to set the context for your team and try to lose some level of ownership to them. See your job as aligning everyone around the problem to be solved and unleashing their creativity and your own to actually then go and solve that problem. The solution that you come up with as a team with that shared context will be so much more powerful. And then finally, be very careful to manage throughout the entire, particularly around the launch process, the collaboration and ensuring that your product is successful at launch, not just by technically deploying it, but by owning that go-to-market. Even if other people technically own elements of the go-to-market, it's you that really needs to bring all those pieces together to ensure that your product is successful. Just as a reminder, context describes the underlying reasons that guide a specific course of action or direction. So if you're not talking in terms of whys, then you're not talking in terms of context. So why are you doing something, not the what or the how? You really do motivate your team when you can talk about their impact on the customer and the business, and you will make them quite unhappy if you're very prescribed when you prescribe a specific solution like the what, and they're particularly sensitive being told to how to go about doing their job and when something has to be done. So try to spend more time up in that context zone. So today, the key takeaways. Remember that there's 4 mindsets, each drive a particular type of important activity in your product development lifecycle. You will need to deploy these to create an environment that motivates your team and sets context and allows your team to kind of really own those solutions and come up with better outcomes. And then it's okay, we're all human. Play to your go-to strengths, but recognize and balance your own weaknesses and try to develop and practice those that you might not be so strong at. And in particular, be aware of what your stakeholders, particularly say in a founder situation, what their weaknesses are, and try to balance them out. And finally, we'll revisit this. It'll be also in the materials. The influential product manager goes into more detail about how to actually practice these mindsets actually throughout the book, throughout your product management career. And if you wish to get in touch with me, we will also drop these links in there. We'd love you to reach out. I'm very open to connecting to anyone in the industry and answer questions that you might have that come up other than today. And with that, let's get into Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ken, for awesome presentation and also the book discount offer. I would just ask you to, I think I can do that from you. I am going to be a host again of so I can share my screen. So let me just share here the screen so we see Q&A, which is exactly what we're going to have. And because we did ask people to do their questions when they registered on the webinar, we have already a bunch of questions that we can do to you. So I do invite everyone to thanks, Ken, also for dropping the discount and the link on the chat. And everyone that has any specific question can then just jump into the Q&A feature of Zoom and do it from there, or ask to speak. Okay, so the first question is from Manuel. Manuel is listening to us as we speak, is one of the participants that is here live. Hi, Manuel. Hope you are enjoying it so far. So Manuel has a question, which is the differences and points of contact between those mindsets, which I think is really interesting. So I guess the difference is exactly how you explain the matrix and the stages. But what are the contexts between those mindsets? And do we need all those mindsets in the same team, or is this something that evolves over time and the same product manager can have different mindsets as he, is in different stage of maturity inside the company or
Great.
the product
So my central thesis is that you as a product manager need to practice all 4 of these mindsets in your product practice, in your product craft. So it's not something that you can outsource very easily. You're going to miss things, and but that said, it is important to be understanding of where you might be weaker and kind of embracing that, and working with a mentor or seeking out people in your organization that can maybe help coach you. What I did, for example, was when I struggled with being that evangelist, I asked for advice, and I had a manager, mentor who walked through very specific things with me, including how I was approaching stakeholders, for example, how I would often just go straight to a fact and describe that rather than paint more of a narrative. And so he taught me a little bit about how to actually set up a narrative and the importance of emotion and qualitative side to quantitative, hard, kind of like raw facts. And being right as well was not something that wouldn't necessarily win the day, which actually quite a surprise to me very young. Was like, oh, you mean like that doesn't always win the day? Of course not. Of course, that's obvious now. But so embracing that and just being, look, these are coachable, just like anything else. There's nothing wrong with you. Just sort of move into it. Now, what I have done as a leader, so this is where the question is quite interesting to dig into a little deeper. As a leader, as I've built out teams, I've kept in my head like where I might be adding certain natural strengths, because it's unavoidable that people will gravitate to that, particularly in moments of crisis. They will gravitate to something that is a kind of a comfort zone or a strength. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to make sure that over time I built teams that had very complementary skills here. So not only was I hiring for particular product management skill sets, but I was looking at these, what I'll call softer or more human skills, and say, okay, this is someone who's quite naturally, like they really excel at analytics, or they are a little curmudgeonly maybe, and they tend to point out all of the problems. They're a little bit more of that challenger mindset. And here's someone who's very extroverted, a bit more of the evangelist mindset, that may actually be missing those other skills. So by putting people together as a product management team, I found them starting to work off each other and sort of pushing on each other. And so I encouraged a culture of kind of cross collaboration, sharing your perspectives and asking for people to just look at things from their natural areas. And so it's important to both leverage other people, but it's also important to practice the skills yourself.
Okay, very well. And I think that leads us to the question of Paulo. Hi, Paulo. Paulo Gonçalves. What distinguished an outstanding product manager from all others? And I think, you have outstanding experience building teams yourselves. What are you looking for?
Yeah. Well, always revealed in the book, chapter 12. I have five superpowers that, look, I've been actually working with the team here. I'm actually currently in Australia, and I've been working with the team here on building out tools to assess product management skills. I think we have something like 30 skills we've identified, and they're all important. Me personally, when I look at the superpowers, the things that really, really separate the top 1% product managers that I've worked with before. So this is admittedly my experience and maybe a little anecdotal here and there, but I have done some research to dig into this, and it's interesting how these things, which probably won't surprise you. The first superpower is this insatiable intellectual curiosity, just like this desire to always be digging in and understanding, and sort of not being afraid to go to sources for data that maybe they wouldn't have thought of, like just go and talk to customers, right? They're tenacious in that curiosity, and they're always asking why. They do so in a human way. So they understand that they also need to make decisions at some point. That analysis paralysis is a bad thing. That working in ambiguity, they kind of get that balance right. They're okay with working in kind of messy data and moving forward. So they don't use, their curiosity doesn't slow them down, but it's like this sort of like desire of like, why is that? Why is that? I hear it because I can hear the language that they're using and the questions they're asking others. The second superpower is this sense of ownership. They just have this deep sense of owning all aspects of their product. Doesn't matter if it's the department reports to them or not, or it's someone else's job. they work and they figure out who is going to influence their product, and they work to collaborate with others to get to the necessary outcomes. It's not that they ignore organizational functional lines or hierarchies. They actually are quite astute. They kind of recognize that they don't have authority to just go and order people around. So they figure out how to influence them. They go and own. I never hear those types of product managers say something like, that's not my job, or that's not my responsibility. They're prepared to actually take ownership and even responsibility, even if some aspect of, say, the go-to-market plan doesn't come together. They don't think in terms of just delivering something and hoping that someone else will pick it up. The third superpower is that they're actually over communicators. Like they understand that the message does not land the first time, but they're not doing it sort of ad nauseum in an annoying way. They find creative ways to communicate through actions, through different forums, through written, email, verbal. They think it ain't stretch people. It's number 4. Where they don't just jump into the solutions. They're thinking about where their product needs to be ultimately. And then the final superpower is they really live an egoless existence. They don't, they're humble, they're willing to be wrong, they're mature. There's this level of professionalism and sort of sense of themselves. It's not like they don't suffer like many of us do, of imposter syndrome and worry about like our careers or anything like that, but they don't necessarily, they don't come across to others as having a big ego. They're prepared to sort of subjugate that a little bit for the success of the team and the company and their customer in particular.
Yeah, I bet those people are really, really rare, because 5 superpowers, which are really, especially the last one, ego is distinct.
Let me be clear. You don't find all 5 in one. It's like you got to be, as a leader, you got to be ready to settle for having some strengths and knowing that it's unfair to expect everyone, a product manager, to master all 5 of those.
Okay, so I think we have another question here from Paul, and I think Paul is from Australia, which I think is a good question, just in sequence. So what tips to improve and practice your lesser superpowers or mindsets in this way?
Mm-hmm.
Have any quick wins or tips that people can take to improve those aspects?
Sure. The unsatisfying answer is no. It takes years of practice and applying yourself, and there's nothing like putting yourself into the situation.
Yeah.
So first of all, don't be afraid to try. If you're not naturally analytic and don't really know how to approach like data, and maybe a little fearful of talking to highly technical people who might come across as a little bit disrespectful for people who maybe don't be as technical or analytic, so what? Go get the data, see what you learn, try to understand it, go and ask dumb questions and say, look, I'm new at this, ask a question. So just don't be afraid to do it, put it into practice. Now, specifically, what I did on the Evangelist mindset is I put myself in uncomfortable situations outside of the work environment to learn some of these skills. So I'm speaking to you today. I don't have to be doing that. I'm doing it for myself and to share my thoughts. And every time I do it, I learn how to do this fearlessly, confidently, and learn more and more how to convey my message, right? Practicing some public speaking, finding groups to be able to do that. That was a good way to actually overcome both the fear, but also to practice a little bit. In the challenger mindset, learning how to structure your thinking around, or practicing structuring your thinking about the underlying reasons why not to do something. I see a lot of product pitches about why to do something, and they're not critical enough. So I always recommend write down at least 1 or 2 pages that includes the risks, what that might mean, and why are the reasons to not pursue something. That's a real art. If you can actually practice that, that's a great place to start for the
Yeah.
challenger mindset. On the explorer mindset, hold a brainstorm with your team members and see how it goes. Start with a small question. Doesn't have to be where should we go with our product, because it'll be too broad. Start with a focus question of like, how do we improve engagement in the product? Or we have lots of customer service tickets around this area. How can we make them go away? So go and try that out. Do that a couple of times, and you'll find you'll get yourself getting better at contextualizing the problem, and then running kind of that kind of open brainstorm with your teams to get a wealth of ideas. And then finally, on the analytics side, as I kind of mentioned it before, just to really give it a shot. It's the best way to do that one.
Mm-hmm. Very
Carry on,
well.
Anna. Good.
So I think we are heading towards our very last slides and questions. And one of the things that is actually a question. Of course, here you have the QR code for the 40% discount code for the influential product manager book. But one of the questions I have to you, it's more of a personal question, is what led you to write this book? Because I know you are also one of the founders of this course at Berkeley. And was it because you felt that the literature and book offers in this space still was lacking? You
Yeah.
know, what was the drive?
It is a great question. So a couple of things. First of all, I love a lot of the literature.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of really great books have come out around product management in the last, starting 10 years ago, but accelerating now. And so I do think that we're coming in on our own in terms of a craft that can be codified and discussed and sort of articulated in different ways. What I did notice was when you actually look at this specific subject about how do I be influential in my organization, how do I actually put that into practice? I heard a lot of product managers were saying, I hear that we're all about influence and not authority, that we're all about having this responsibility, and I hear it, but then I actually think, I don't know how to do it. So what does an influential product manager actually go and do? And so that's what I sought out to write, is a very practical, hands-on. This is meant to be both, you can read through it and as a reference to sort of say, okay, how do I apply myself to this situation? The starting point to actually use influence in your everyday life. And so that's what really motivated me, was this gap that I saw, and a lot of product managers really struggling to say, okay, how do I actually really become influential? Or in the case of leaders, how do I coach my teams to sort of practice that kind of influencing skill? It's something that many of us have learned by doing. I aim to bring the best out and sort of accelerate you as much as possible by giving you really, really great ways and techniques to get started here.
Okay, very well. So let me tell you that we are also launching a course here, Ken. It's called the Product Management Fundamentals course. It's going to be with Catholic Lisbon Business and Economics University. And, one of the reasons is, of course, because we felt that there was no formal offering of a good product management fundamentals course. And we're trying to cover most of these topics, including digital product management. Product management has, a way to bring innovation and digital transformation for companies. And it's actually starting the 13th of September. And if you're interested, you can also apply and get hold of the application process through this link here. So let me tell you that it was really a big thanks of and I want to acknowledge the fact that Ken, you might not have heard this in the beginning, but Ken is actually in Australia, so it's 4 or almost 5 a.m. now.
5 a.m.
So
now.
in the morning, and he had to wake up really, really early to be here with us. So thank you, Ken,
It's a
again
pleasure. It's a pleasure.
for this excellent presentation. It was wonderful afternoon, at least for us, early morning for you. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you, all you guys, next week. We'll be having Mihaela Drahici. She is a product manager at Volkswagen at the Grosso Product podcast. So that's it. We're done. So thank you so much, and have a nice day. Bye, Ken.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being in, joining us today. Bye bye.